The Brutally Speaking podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia. For over 30 years, they have been the go-to destination for all your music merch needs. From working with today's hottest bands to create truly one-of-a-kind pieces, as well as boasting a truly massive online store, Rockabilia is your one-stop shop when it comes to band merch. Use our code BRUTALLY at checkout and take 10% off your total purchase order. Huge thanks to Rockabilia for their continued support, and now, on to the show.
People say you have to have a lot of passion for what you're doing. This rings true because it's so hard that if you don't, any rational person would give up. It's really hard, and you have to do it over a sustained period of time. So if you don't love it, and if you're not having fun doing it, you're gonna give up.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Brutally Speaking podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guest is Chae Maas, formerly of Defeater, currently of Love Letter. Also, he is a well-renowned producer in his own right, doing a lot of different things with a lot of different bands. This was one that I don't know if I've had a podcast get scheduled so fucking fast. Like, from the initial email blast of the Love Letter single announcing, the EP, that essentially I leapt at it. Defeater is one of those bands that, and you'll hear me kind of talk about this, but Defeater is one of those bands that has been on the lips of so many of my friends for so many years, and for some reason I just never gave him a fair shake. And literally, as I said, you'll hear me tell Jay this, and I kind of almost didn't, because I thought it'd be a little cringe, thought it'd be a little weird, and I just kind of have come to learn over the last couple of years of losing friends and losing contact with people that we need to be more mindful of our intentions and to put good out in the world. And obviously telling Jay that his music is something I found really randomly, and that I really enjoyed it and have since gone on to become a big fan of Defeater, that it felt good to kind of discuss that. But the more I've thought about it leading up to doing this conversation, I keep thinking about these sort of missed opportunities sometimes that arise in our lives. And I don't know that they happen for everyone else, kind of like they do for me, where in the case of Defeater, a song came on from their album Abandoned, and I was getting tattooed while I was in Oregon, and basically, kind of as I was like, this song's really cool, I wonder who it is. Couldn't really place it by the vocals or anything like that, but I just kept thinking, I was like, I should stop and ask, who is this? And I think there are so many moments like that in our lives that we often miss on because I don't know if we just get in our own way, if we're afraid to ask questions, if it's something bigger than that I can't really put my finger on. But I know when I was thinking about that, leading up to knowing I was going to do this intro and outro for this episode, I just kind of thought of all those moments in my life recently that I could recall. Like, thinking about when my wife and I were out in Salt Lake City, and we were coming back from this island that basically had buffalo and all this other cool stuff. It was like a national park. And I just kept looking at a few things. And I tried to take photos a lot more of things because I think it's something that is kind of a creative endeavor, and also allows me to kind of remember things as they're happening in the moment, to kind of take a moment to remember them. And, also don't need to take photos and can be in the moment as well. But it was a thing we're driving, and it's this long, like basically two-way road, and you're in the middle of all the water. And it stretches on for like a mile or two. It's a long road to get to this national park. And I just kept looking over, and I kept seeing the nice serene water, and there's like mountains and like the clouds kind of coming over all of it and the way it's reflecting off everything. And I just kept going, man, that'd be a really cool photo. And I just kept staring at it. And then finally I was like, fuck it, I'm pulling over. I'm taking a photo real quick because I'm going to be really, really bummed that I didn't do it down the road. And it's one of those that when I show people the photo, they're just like, I can't believe you took that with your phone. It looks so cool. And it just looks, really incredible to see, like, everything the way it looks. And I constantly think of things like that, also thinking of saying something to someone in real time, or, just little minute things that may not seem like much in the grand scheme of things when you kind of really are thinking about them in the correlation of your life. But I think when you really assess them in the moment and kind of step away, you're like, this is something that I will probably be better if I do ask this question, if I do take this photo, if I do the thing. Essentially, if you just do it. And I think so often, why do we hesitate? If there's something that's kind of gravitating us toward doing something and it's for the better, why are we so afraid to do it? And I don't know. I just kind of keep thinking about, I guess you would call them misconnections is all I could come up with to kind of use a old Craigslist term. I used to love reading those. I don't know if anyone else ever read those, but they were always so interesting to see how someone would be like, I saw you and you were looking at me and we shared a glance and I was going to go up to you and ask you or talk to you, but I just didn't. And instead, now you're prosing this thing to the great universal void and hoping somebody knows that person and is subsequently able to, make up for the misconnection of the thing you didn't do in the real moment. And that's just, I don't know, it's just something I think a lot more about, is taking those chances, doing those things, and hoping that, some good will come out of it. And for me, to kind of wrap up the original, reason I'm talking about this, though, I wouldn't have found this band. I wouldn't have been able to connect with some people who, Defeater is a really big part of their musical journey and their musical growth. And just getting to kind of expand myself musically and in a lyrical sense as well, listening to the band over the last handful of years. But it's a thing where I've really been thinking about that a lot lately, just those missed moments. And it kind of also has come up in Sex and the City. My wife and I are rewatching that. We got about a half a season to go. And there's a few times throughout the show where, Carrie kind of brings that up and other characters sort of bring this up, this idea of like, oh, well, what if I didn't do this? Or what if I would have said? Or all these would haves, woulda, coulda, shouldas, essentially. And I think life's too short. You shouldn't live with those moments and wonder what if. Like, just do it. All that said, let's get into my conversation with Jay. It's a great one. I can't wait for you to hear it, and I'll talk to you all on the other side of it. Podcasting.
Okay, cool. Podcast away. Well, I was just in the middle of saying you were talking about Jordan Buckley, and we toured with him. That must have been fall 2011, and awesome dude. It was Every Time I Die Defeater tour, UK for 2 weeks. Rained every day, of course it did, because it was November in the UK. But I got to know him, and just such a talent. So I'm starting the podcast by saying Jordan Buckley is a great guy and very, very good at guitar.
He absolutely is. He is very quickly. It's been kind of weird. I was saying in the intro, and by the time people hear this, they'll have heard like the whole thing. But it's a thing where, for me, getting to kind of start this new friendship of sorts after admiring this dude from afar, which sounds even creepier, for like 20 something years. It's weird to be reminded, because doing this show for almost 8 years now and talking to so many different people that I've long admired and so forth, you just kind of get over like the fandom of things in general. But then sometimes there's like that moment where you're like, and it was like, I joked with someone, I was like, Jordan sending me his phone number. He's like, hey man, like, let's keep in touch. Like, let's, text me, da 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 da. And I made the comment, I was like, I haven't felt this like sense of fandom in a bit, where I'm like, oh my God. And then I was like, it feels weird. And then I quickly kind of stomped it down, because it's like, all right, he's just a person, man. Like, it's not a big deal. But it is nice to be reminded of that feeling every now and again, when you kind of have become, I would say, a little bit jaded to everything because you've been doing it for so long.
Well, I mean, I think you just described, or let's do an entire podcast about Jordan Buckley right now. But no, I think you just described like one of my favorite aspects too, and not just Jordan, but people that I've met over the years. Like you're going to meet just a myriad of like different individuals who've got, this is a funny little subculture, right? Like you've got people who've got different amounts of like cred or like fame, and some people want the mystique and some people less so. I typically gravitate towards those who don't have the chip on their shoulder, like who just, dude, because it's punk. Like for me, it's punk, right? Like the least punk thing you can do is be too cool for anything. And so that, I think that's one of the things that I really liked about Jordan specifically, but also like so many people that I've met, through my years of touring and recording bands. I've been a producer for 20 years now and all that stuff. Like all my favorite people are just like talented and humble,
I mean, as somebody who has a lot of friends that kind of constantly make the comment about me about like, you're one of the nicest people, and so sometimes when people are like, I'm like, well, that's the kind of people I want to have. Like, I want people that inspire me to do more and push beyond what I'm doing. But I also want a good collection of people that are just good people, because I mean, especially, nearing 40 in a couple of months, it's like, I don't have time for other people's bullshit. Like if you're a suck, then like be gone. I don't want you around. I don't have time for it. I don't have the bandwidth for it.
Yeah, dude, same. And I think that no matter how hard people try, usually if someone is like that, it will usually pretty quickly reveal itself.
100%.
Yeah.
So I did something today I haven't done in a while, and I wrote some questions down. So if you see me looking off to the side, it's because I want to get some questions right.
Yeah.
Because actually I've been after you for a while. I just didn't really know the best way to go about doing it, because I get weird in my head when I reach out to people in a more professional setting or sending DMs, and I'm like, I shouldn't do this, but I just want to have the person on to have a conversation. So, without rehashing old shit that you probably have said ad nauseum,
sure.
What made you want to start a new band like 9-ish years after leaving Defeater?
Yeah. So I know. So I'll be honest, I got the itch. I thought like Checkmate, like I've been playing in bands since I was 14 years old. I was 35. I had just gone through a bunch of personal stuff in my life. I met my now wife of 8 years. We've been together about 9 years next month.
Same. Congrats.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And we wanted to start a family. It happened. I don't know. I think it just gets in us. I think it might be the same. Again, better lovers. We'll talk about Jordan, but I think like for some of us, like, well, we don't know what else to do. Like we can't not. And I kind of really for a minute there believed like, cool, I'm done. I can walk away. And I'm like really, really happy with everything I achieved. And I think what sort of happened is that I realized it actually wasn't as much about the check marks, like landing all those. For a minute there, I thought like, okay, I got all these check marks. Let's put that over here. I'm going to go be a dad. I'm going to make records and all that stuff. But that can stay over there, and I'm really proud of it. And that's awesome. And the itch, man, I think what is the truth of the matter is that fundamentally, I don't know how to not create. And when I'm not creating, I feel like this unease, like this unsettlement. And so it was New Year's 2016, 2017. I can't remember which. I texted Quinn, who was the vocalist of Verse. I had just spent New Year's Eve with Andy, who's now the drummer, or who's the original drummer to Defeater and is the drummer of Love Letter. And so I spent the evening New Year's with Andy, because we've been friends for 20 odd years now. And then I woke up and I was like, it's like a new year. I don't know. It was like cheesy, but I was like, all right. So I texted Quinn and I was like, what do you think about like doing something? Right. And I have the good fortune that having made records in this world for a couple decades now, like I know a lot of people, and I typically do develop like great relationships with almost every artist I work with. And we keep in touch. Right. And there's a handful that I really resonate with creatively, artistically. And Quinn, at the time, Sean from Verse was like vocally one of those sort of like lightning in a bottle vocalists that if I was going to do a new project, I kind of just like wanted to assemble my own like personal dream team, you know, like what was it? The 96,
the Bulls?
Olympic dream team,
Oh,
or no,
the dream-
96
yeah.
Bulls, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just like, I just wanted to like put together whatever that would be, knowing that like my family life, dad life, all that stuff is going to take precedent. But because I sort of had this like bubbling up of like, I just want to do something else. I started making calls. Right. And so another one of the calls I made was to Matt Spence, who's played in bands in the area. I've been friends with Matt for 20 years as well. And so we put together this thing. And then now someone that is my like primary assistant here at the studio, he's got his own studio in Virginia too. But Dave helped me produce our latest record. He joined on bass. So like the whole thing is family, and it just feels right to do. And so I think I'm actively pursuing creating art for closer to the original reasons I did when I started Defeater. You know, it's like Andy and I started Defeater, and you know, we hired, you know, all the different people in the band. And early on, and this is a really interesting thing, right? Because like early on, there's no expectations. You don't think it's going to do anything. You're just making music because like it's pure. It's just like what you want to do. And the odd outcome of that can be that if it goes like well, like, you know what I mean? Like if it goes well, like all of a sudden you start opportunities unearth, and you take those opportunities and there starts to be some growth. And then you're like, oh, wow, this is like a moment I've kind of wanted to happen ever since I was a kid. And at the time, like I'm 43 now, right? So like I was like 28 when I started Defeater. And at the time I was like, oh man, like I should probably do this. I was at an age where I was like, is it settle down time? Like, you know, and yeah. And I was at an age where I was like, oh, of course it's going to happen, like into my early 30s. But I went with it. As you do that, and like you put out records and there's expectations and there's tour, and never forget it. Like once money gets involved, like the gloves come off, all bets are off. Like that makes things super complicated. And especially when I think this happens to a lot of bands, like in our world, where like to be successful means like you can tour and you can come home with some money. And there's like this weird purgatory that people can get into, like musicians can get into, where the most money they make is out on the road. And that's what they want to do. But they saturate the market. So they can only be out on the road for so long, right? There's only so many times you can go to Europe. You go to Australia at most every 18 months, right? You do an A market, full US, you do a B market, full US, right? And you start running out of places to go. And then so what happens is your managers and your agents and everyone, they're like, well, we need a new record. And if you have a new record, you know, you can get the Warped Tour offer. If you get a new record, you can get the support slot, right? And so all of a sudden, it's kind of insidious in the way that it'll kind of seep in, and you don't realize, you're like, oh shit, like I've really drifted from why I started doing this in the first place, right? And so also, there's something else I want to mention, is that like, if you don't take enough space between the record and then the next one, like I'm just speaking for myself personally, like those creative juices really have to recharge. And when you're on like a record cycle and it's 2-3 years later and everybody starts going like, hey, we need another one. Yeah, exactly. You know, you're like, okay. And it's difficult to feel as inspired. It's difficult to not feel like you're sort of like retreading ground you've already been on. You know what I mean? Like, so that is to say, starting fresh here with Love Letter in my 40s, my hardcore band in my 40s, right? Like, it's cool because I'm back to only creating to scratch that like very, very necessary itch that I've always had. I think I'll probably always have, and not having no walls or guidelines about like any expectations from labels, any expectations from fans, any expectations for anything, and just making something that we all love and that we can stand behind creatively no matter what, and whatever happens, happens.
So a few things to that. You know, I hate the stupid cliche question of like, well, tell me, what does the band mean, or how did you come across it? But I, as somebody who likes everything within reason has a purpose. And I think when you're starting something so late in life, not to say that 40 is late in life, but it's at least at a point where your intentions are a lot more intentional. You're a lot more focused with what you're doing. Everything has to have a reason, because when you're hitting a certain age, anything detracting you from the things that you want to do doesn't give you the bandwidth to do the things you want. So whether it be family, career, whatever.
Mhm.
So to me, when I heard the first song and thought, better or Love Letter, it was a thing where it becomes this thing where I'm like, is this band name sort of to me, I took it as being like a representation of like, this is a love letter to all of you to kind of find that inspiration and to kind of feel youthful, to feel like you have a voice, something to say. And that essentially this is maybe a love letter to the scene that you love so much.
Yeah, I do feel that way. I can go into sort of like the origin of the name a little bit. So I will say that the original EP, so the band was called Death of a Nation there, but we never played any shows. We got together and it started with 4 songs, and it was just like we were here at my place and we decided we were going to make this. And at that point, I was still pretty close to like having not been in a band anymore and being like, I kind of drew a boundary where I was like, let's make some music and put it out because I want to scratch that itch. And I did. And I'm really proud of the EP. It streamed like exceedingly well for something that never had any shows, and all that stuff that was really encouraging and just nice. Then and normally I let Quinn speak on the political stuff because it's not my bag, right? But it's very, Quinn's very much more so. I'm more of like the songwriter type, but we were reacting to things that were going on in the world at the time that we didn't like, and so we named the band Death of a Nation. And the lyrics, and again, I'm not going to speak for Quinn's lyrics, but the lyrics on that release are far more in that box, right? And that felt like an isolated thing. And I think we kind of thought like, cool, maybe we'll do something again one day. We'd had like this group chat going for years where we're like, yeah, we're going to like do more, but like nothing really ever came of it. And then a year later, there's this documentary, this like nationalist documentary called Death of a Nation came out. And I think I'm going to get this wrong. I think the guy's name's like Dinesh D'Souza or something like that. And I don't know a ton about it, but all I know is from what I can gather just from a sort of like a miles distance glance here is that the documentary did not identify with our lyrics whatsoever. And or I should say Quinn's lyrics, in that we started getting these Facebook messages from people that were like, had very, very much the wrong idea about who we were and what we were doing. And we kind of knew then, I think, that, like this is getting associated with something in a way of which it was not meant to be, and is actually like in many ways contrary to Quinn's message. So, but we kind of left it because it was like, okay, like it's out. That's kind of an unfortunate thing that happened a year later. We don't know what we're going to do. Fast forward to, a year ago or whatever it was. We realized we're going to do this LP. We realized it was going to be on Iodine. Originally, Iodine Records was going to be putting out Death of a Nation LP1, right? Which is now Love Letter LP1. And right around the time we got the signing graphic from Iodine, we just like, we actually had something like physical to see, right? And we were like, oh, and we all looked at it and we just said like, this doesn't feel right. And I felt really bad, right? Because we were like, oh man, changing the name of a band kind of sucks. It's like, it can be, first of all, you have to pick another name, right? And not only that, but like, it's confusing to people out there. Like, wait, what's going on? It's sort of like starting over again, so we co-opted the Death of a Nation EP as like, that's now the Death of a Nation EP by Love Letter. But we had this, I was so surprised. It only took like 2 hours. Within 2 hours, we had the new name. And Quinn, we were on a group chat, as every band is, right? And sent like this huge list of names. And immediately Love Letter stood out to me. And it was for a couple of reasons. I liked the alliteration, truthfully. I just think I like that. And then when I read it as a double entendre, which is like, of course, like you said, like a love letter to someone, like a love letter to the community, like here we are again, like here it is. But the other thing I liked, and as I get older, it's like this feeling of putting understanding and compassion and patience and all of the, like loving someone or loving something is not always easy, right? And having like the wherewithal as a person to pause, not have a knee-jerk reaction, to understand someone's point of view, even when it might be in opposition to your own, and like especially when it's in opposition to your own, right? Like I like the double entendre of the name where it was like one who lets love, right? And all the things that go along with like being someone who lets love prevail. So that was like the real reason I like it. And then there's like one quick side thing that just so happened to be a serendipitous thing was my wedding song with my wife was Love Letter Typewriter by Mineral.
Oh,
so I didn't hate that either. Yeah.
So you sort of actually hit on something again. Like it's always kind of nice when I feel like the questions I've written sort of happen in just serendipitously in the conversation. So I kind of written down, on this show, I like talking about getting older in life and just kind of figuring out who you are, navigating it. Because I feel like a lot of people that listen to the show are roughly my age in either direction. So at that point, it can be a thing where, people have grown up listening to you. They identify with a certain album, a song, whatever. And it just becomes this thing where, maybe they're at a crossing point in their life where they're figuring things out too. And hearing you and I talk about something, they're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. So something I wanted to ask you, because you're in this interesting position, having done something, you still have your career, have been producing records for, like you said, 2 decades, did the band thing for a while, started it later in life, left it. Now you're coming back to this new thing. So figuring out who you are when you're no longer known for the thing most people associated you with initially and what that process is like for you to reconcile it all. And then the second part of that is now you get to experience firsts again. They're familiar in the sense of, this, it's familiar to what you've already done in the past. But now, being 43, you're having first experiences all again that you probably never thought you would. So kind of explaining those two things as they correlate to your career and with Love Letter now.
Yeah. So, not being associated with the thing that most people would know me for, I would say that's like half true,
Right.
Like people still know. And so that's there. But yeah, probably maybe less so than like it would have been otherwise. That's never been a huge thing for me. And kind of like going back to like what we were talking about earlier at the beginning of the pod, which is like the notoriety thing for me I don't dislike it or anything, but it's never been a huge draw for me. It's like, cool. Like I like to keep things like humble and just like, yep, like, if you like the stuff I make and all that stuff, that's awesome. But just like we talked about earlier at the beginning of this, it's like, I'm just a guy, you know what I mean? Like who's worked hard, in my opinion, in this world, and it has some things to show for it. But that hasn't been as big of a deal. But to your second point, that part has been a cooler deal or a bigger, I don't know, it's bigger, but cooler deal for sure. Because, talking about what we were talking about with like, or I was talking about with the agents and the expectations, there's one moment that really stands out in my mind. And going back to touring with Defeater, was landing in Germany. And when you first land in Germany, you're first doing your German tour, your first headliner, right? Dude, I remember like the way the doors opened at the airport. I remember the coffee I got. I remember like the driver, and I remember packing like my guitar into the van. And I just remember everything about that first, whatever. And then you do it enough, and something about the sentiment of the tour changes, where this sounds terrible, but like when it goes from like, I get to do this to feeling a little bit more like I have to do this.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a big difference. And so I remember getting in the van in Europe for one of our later tours and jumping in, and everyone was just sort of like not in a great mood. Like everyone's just kind of bored. Everyone's like, you know what I mean? And that's really indicative of a sentiment that can be cancerous inside of anything, any structure, especially like an artistic structure like that. So now you are right. These firsts are really good. It's back to like, we have no reason to do this except for what it means to us personally, what it means to us as a group of friends, what it means to us artistically and creatively. And all of that lends itself to, this is just really, really fun. And all of the weirds and the barriers and, all of the schmegma, so to speak, that comes along with being a full-time touring musician, it's gone. So now it's way lighter, like I just finished booking tickets. I think we just announced we're playing with Crime in Stereo on July 6th in Orlando. And like, it's not like, oh shit, I got to go to fucking Florida. It is a little bit. I got to go to Florida in July. It's not great, but like I feel more like I get to go and play this cool show. I love crime, and like the promoters flying us out. It's like, what an opportunity.
Right.
So I feel really, really grateful for that. So yeah, the flip side's been really nice.
I feel like something you're saying is kind of something I went through and I sort of alluded to when we were starting our conversation. Doing this for so long, and it's not the same as the rigors necessarily of touring, the cycle of putting something out, a record, and the expectation, but it sort of is where it's like, I have put the expectation, this comes out on this day, there's a quote unquote product now.
Yep.
And doing this for 8 years and doing all the things that have come along with it, and the relationships and sort of even the sponsorship opportunities and such, it's hard not to kind of parlay this into the same sentiments of what you guys go through in being in a band, because this started because, well, unlike a band who wanted to be like, I want to make music and I like hanging out with you, like, let's start this thing. This kind of was started out of a frustration of watching some of my, actually, to be very specific, it was watching someone interview Jordan at a war tour. And they were just like, how's the tour going? And I'm like, fuck you. Don't ask stupid questions like that. Like, you have a really good opportunity. Come prepared, like be better than that. And so, it's funny, all these years later, sometimes I'll get bad comments on someone's like, should shut the fuck up and let the person talk. And I'm like, or don't interview them, or interview them differently. And I'm like, well, this isn't really an interview. It's a conversation. And if I just spoke in one sentence questions or whatever, like you want, that's not how a conversation goes. But then I also challenge them. I'm like, well, then you do better. That's literally how I started. So if I can be the impetus of why you start doing your thing, 100%. I'm here to tell you 8 years later, man, there's a lot of cool things I've gotten to do and some great friendships I've made because of doing this, because I got agitated 8.5 years ago and thought I could do better. That being said, there's a lot of things that come along with it, like you said, where, to kind of get to the point more quickly, I lost my why. It just felt like a job, like you said, like where it's like you're punching in, I'm doing it because I have to. And this is the thing I have to do. And I just got really burned out. And, I stopped listening and enjoying music because it felt like a chore to have to listen to it and find some new way to talk to someone about this thing that they've probably discussed 100 times already, or for 10, 15, 20 years, and finding a new way to it or through it. And so I just kind of gave myself permission after going to therapy of over analyzing things and trying to solve all the hypothetical what ifs and just living more in the moment. And then I ended up doing 2 chats where I didn't write a bunch of questions down. I just was in the moment and let a conversation flow. And it was so enjoying to me. I enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the interaction, and I got more out of it. And I think ultimately from that point forward, I think everyone has had more fun doing it this way versus like, okay, here's all my 17 questions, let's go. And I'm not allowing for that spontaneity to happen, that creative freedom to happen. And I think after doing that, I had found my why again. It reinvigorated me. So it feels like, when I saw the email literally yesterday, this whole thing has transpired in a day's time from when the blast email went out to when we're doing this. So everything is pretty fresh and new in the eyes of media right now. But it's a thing too, where, I mean, again, kind of serendipitously being able to kind of go into something to discuss. And you've already said the lyrics aren't your thing. But obviously with Misanthropic Holiday or Vacation, lyrically it's pretty heavy when you really take the time to start going through it. To me, and I think everyone can probably find their way of what this means to them, but the line, find the bandage that fits your trauma, don't mean shit until you learn to deal with it. It hits especially hard as someone, like I just said, who's gone to therapy and kind of had to address things that maybe I was putting on the back burner and not being real with myself, which in case, how can you be real to anyone around you when you can't even be for yourself? So I kind of wanted to speak to that, but I think even more, again, that there's more intention of everything. It seems like everything's done with a purpose. Like your first show of sorts is a music video shoot for everything. And then you're donating the proceeds to a local collective for yourself. So it seems like this project is one built out of needing to have a bigger purpose than just the collective people that make it. Is that something that you feel? Is that even the line that I brought up, is that something that resonates with you all these years later?
Yeah, no question. touching on that and something else that you said, I think you just, I just want to acknowledge the fact that I think you made a really, really wonderful point when you talked about letting the, like the creative serendipity occur. And I think that there's an intangible, whether it's via a podcast or whether it's via music, that like when you can capture, again, to reuse the phrase lightning in a bottle in that way, it is something that will give the goosebumps on the arms. It'll get someone in their car listening, going like, fuck yeah, like the nod, and it does really hit people. So I just wanted to say, like, it was a great point to capture that. Regarding the connecting with people, I know when, I don't want to say hiring, asking my friends, hiring sounds so wrong. Asking the people.
I mean, it technically isn't when you're at a point where this is now going to be a business.
Yeah. But like, asking the people if they would like to be in this project with me, that I like to be like sort of like RoboCop, like people's like strong suits, like ding, 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 like zone in on those. And like, I love making music with Andy. I always have. And I think like some of the early success that Defeater had was just because Andy is I don't even know how to put it. I am so blessed and lucky to be able to play music with Andy because he is so good at drums, and not just from like what he can play, but how he plays it. And everyone in the band, I think, shares that quality. And so my job here is to create the textures, be the general compositionist, be the general songwriter, produce it, make it sound how it sounds for people. And so it's a big job. But another one of my jobs is, and I think I'm circling back, I promise to answer your question.
Yeah, no, you're good.
But another one of my jobs, because I do want this to be emotionally connective for others, was to sort of put like the A team together here of people that can. I don't tell anyone what to do. I'm not going to tell Andy what to play. I'm not going to tell Quinn what to write. Right. And they're not going to tell me either. Maybe a little bit, but like not too much, and having that, like having everybody be, in my opinion, a master of their own domain has led, listen, we're on this podcast, right? And you had a lyric that connected with you and now is making you reflect, and you're reflecting on the band name, right? All of that stuff is sort of like proof evident that, that this sort of like idea, this concept I had of like putting the right people together and the sum of those parts would be greater. It's really cool for me, right? Because it's one of the first podcasts I've done for the band, and like to like see that coming back to me now makes me feel really good about like maybe some of the choices that I've made. So yes, I think just by way of putting art out into the world, it is very likely that the idea is that we're hoping to do some good, to do hopefully quite a bit of connection with those who listen to and consume our art. And otherwise you just want to put it out, right? Like, what's the point? It's like,
right.
You put it out because so that it can connect, otherwise just, fire up your Dropbox, play it in the car,
Right.
Yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. And it's just been, I can only take credit, for the parts that I contribute to here. And I keep using all these dumb metaphors like A team and dream team, but I feel like my last one here will be like, I feel very good about our Voltron, you know what I mean? That we've made here.
I think the thing that gets kind of interesting about this and listening to people talk about the thing that they're usually here to discuss, the thing that is, as I keep listening to you, is like, you chose the parts that you wanted, the pieces you thought would benefit you, or not benefit, that's the wrong word, but would get the end results that you knew you wanted.
Yeah.
What's interesting to me though, and again, going back to Jordan, I should just call this like a weird Jordan aside. I'll probably text him when we're done and be like, I gave Jay and I gave you so many flowers during this chat.
It's so true.
But it's a thing where I feel like there's this, and there's something I said to Jordan and Mitch when talking to them when Better Lovers had just kind of come out, but it's like, there's obviously you and Andy have a rapport with one another. You know how to speak each other's kind of language, so to speak. How has it been to kind of find a new way of communicating, we'll say, with the rest of the members? Because maybe you haven't expounded upon your relationship in such a creative way like this. How has that been?
Yeah. So it has been unsurprising because just because I've been friends with Matt, who's the other guitar player, for 20 plus years, right? And so I've recorded, I would say, that most of Matt's bands over those 20 years, right? I know how Matt plays. I know his songwriting style. I'm pretty intimately familiar with his work. And I mean this when I say I genuinely think he's like one of the best people I've ever met in my entire life. And so I knew, I don't know how to say that strongly enough. And so I knew that was going to be an amazing fit. I would, hopefully Matt doesn't get mad at me for this. Neither Matt or I are like Jordan shredders, right? Let's just keep talking about Jordan, but we're not like, we're not like, neither of us are like Yngwie Malmsteen or whatever, like, you know, like this type of stuff.
Right.
I think we're more like emotive texturists, you know, with our guitar playing. And I thought Matt's take on texture would be a nice compliment. And I think I was proven right about that, to the textures that I have. One thing about my writing style, and you'll hear it all across Defeater except for the last record, and then you'll hear it in this stuff, is that like, you know, like I have a thing, right? And I don't know how to not have the thing. And it's what I do, right? And so I was looking for someone to contribute different moods that were complementary, that would create sort of like a mood baby, a texture baby, you know, like the output of our two sort of like brains together. And then Dave, you know, who I haven't talked about as much, Dave is very overqualified for this band. He's a exceptional musician and exceptional bass player. And Dave is also, just like Matt, like one of the best people ever. I'll put it this way. This is, I think, a pretty fun story. So Andy and I knew we had to write this record, right? We were like, we have to write it. I'm sitting in my recording studio where one would think we would record our record, right? Like, and we kept trying to do that. And the problem is my kid's here, you know, like life is here. I got mixing and mastering to do, and I've got like just distractions. And so I get this crazy idea. Do you remember a band called Silver Snakes? They were on Bridge 9. Alex Estrada was like kind of the main guy for that band. He built this studio on the other side of the mountains called Pale Moon Ranch. And I kind of call it the Field of Dreams studio. He bought this house, right? Which had like 19-foot or whatever ceilings with this glass panorama that looks out over the Mojave Desert or near the Mojave Desert. It looks over like the desert, right, in California. It's isolated. And I asked Andy, I was like, dude, we're not doing a very good job of writing this record here. And it's just because like, there's just too much other stuff going on. We like my work laptop's here and just like, whatever, you know, cell phones ringing, like all the stuff. So what do you think about this idea? And he was like, I mean, it looks amazing. And it is, if anyone listening to this podcast, just look up Pale Moon Ranch. It's an unbelievable spot, and real big shout out to Alex Estrada for like pulling the trigger and really making like a dream place. Like the new Drug Church just got recorded there. You know, like Rival Schools recorded there now. Like all of this cool stuff is happening over there. I'm literally going there in 2 days. I know this podcast will probably be out later, but like I'm leaving in 2 days to go produce another record there. Anyway, so we have this dream to go there, and it would be our first time there. So in the spirit of letting sort of creativity and serendipity prevail, Andy and I fly out, and I say to Dave, and typically all those early Defeater records were just Andy and I wrote them, like he and I, and then we would incorporate people a little bit later when like it was way closer to finished. And that's how we thought we were going to write this one, because that was our experience writing in the past. And we had some success doing that. We were comfortable doing that. So we were like, okay, we'll do that. So I tell Dave, who's now our bass player, but was not our bass player at the time. I say like, do you want to fly out to LA with us, or whatever, close to LA with us, and just engineer this, because I'm going to be writing. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. He flies out. Then we're there. We showed up at the studio, just so you know, we didn't have any songs written. So we booked 10 days. We knew we were going to record 10 songs. I think we had like 2.5 like skeletons, nothing even remotely close to like what we needed. And so we woke up every day, we got coffee, we would listen to records, we'd drive back to the studio, and we would write a song, and we'd write it right on the spot. Well, it occurred to me pretty quickly that I needed a bass player because
Mm.
I wanted to go like up the neck more, and I wanted to like form things that like if you're the only guitar player writing with a drummer, it's like, well, shit, I got to hold down some of the lower notes just so that like people even understand what the melodic progression in my head is, which means that for all of your like tensions, you're going to have to spring like off your index finger and like make all those minor suspensions I like to make. But, you know, it would be nice if I didn't have to hold anything down here and I can go way up and just form whatever tensions I want. And so we recorded like those 2.5 skeletons or whatever it was. And I was like, Dave, you want to set up a bass amp? And he's like, yeah, for sure. Bro, we just started banging out songs. And so we would just say like, can we give one? I have an idea for this. Dave would just like rip some sort of like cool melodic passage on bass. And we were like, whoa. And we would always know because like Andy would start playing and you'd get that like that moment in the room where we're all looking at each other like, oh, like, yeah, that feels good. And so we started writing that way. Anyway, we do the 10 songs. We fly home. We track all the guitars for all 10 songs. And I'm like, and all the bass and all the whatever. And I have Quinn start to come up to do vocals here at my place. And we get about 5 and almost 6 songs done, right? And those go really well. And I can tell what's been really interesting for me is the ones that I thought, because basically Quinn gets to pick whatever song, you know, they want to start recording first. So, you know, they picked like the last one we wrote in 45 minutes, right? that we were like, yeah, it goes like this, and then it goes like that, and then like just something that just like popped out of our heads. And I've had this experience, like that song "Cowardice" from Defeater. I also wrote that in 45 minutes with Andy, right? So like these things where you don't overthink it and it just feels good, and that's what we really started to experience. Was that it's the non-cerebral, it's the emotive part of songwriting that connects with people. It's not like wouldn't it be cool if we did this technical little schmeh? Like nerds like that stuff, and that's fine. But like, but the fact of the matter is, for most people, it's more about how it feels. It feels good to you, it'll probably feel good to other people. So Quinn started picking all the feel songs, all the groovier songs, all the stuff that were like, we wrote in an hour or less, you know, and, you know, spent the rest of the day just getting the drum takes we wanted, you know? And so we realized that. So we're just over halfway through the record, and Quinn's now starting to try to put vocals over the songs that are maybe a little bit more cerebral, a little bit more technical. It's going okay because Quinn's really talented and kind of, you know, can make something out of nothing. But we stopped, we went upstairs, we grabbed dinner, and I was like, you know, I think we can, Andy was here, and I was like, I think we can all agree that this is not as good as what we've done so far. And everyone's like, yep. And right then and there, I was like, we need to go back to California. And so Andy was kind of like put his head in his hands, like, oh fuck, like he's gonna make me go back to California, you know. And Quinn's like, whoa, like you don't have to do that. Like I'll figure it out. Don't go back to California. And I was like, no. I don't want you to like have to like figure it out. If you're not hearing the songs and going like, I know exactly what to do, and I feel inspired and like compelled and motivated, we're going to put out some fucking mediocre shit. Right. And that is going to be like kind of forced, and it's going to come off that way. So I booked more time at Pale Moon. I called Dave. Dave's on tour with he's in a band called Still Motions, like an instrumental band as well. So I called Dave, he's on tour. He's all grumpy. I think it was like hot or something. And I was like, hey, he's like, what's up? And I was like, yo, can you come back to California in like 10 days or what? It was like super soon. Like his poor wife was like just waiting for him to come home from tour. And meanwhile, like I'm calling him and being like, bro, like we're going back, you know? And he was like, oh, fuck, dude. Like, hold on. Like I gotta like move mountains here. But even he's not in the band. He's just my friend, you know. He goes, he says, yeah, he books tickets. He just sends me a screenshot of his flight itinerary because that's how Dave is, right? He's like, got it, on it, flies to California. In that little window there, the guy that we thought was going to be playing bass, who we're still really close with, like his name's Evan. He's a phenomenal musician. But he just came to us and basically said, like, I don't think that I have time to actually put this on my plate too. This was easier when this was like a band, and it didn't mean I had to do anything, but like this is like not something that I can probably handle now, and which was really cool. And he handled that perfectly. So now we're flying to California, and Dave doesn't know it yet. But we don't have a bass player. Right. And so he before he even knew he was going to be in the band, flew to California twice, helped us basically write the whole fucking record, and is a phenomenal musician, helped us engineer the record. He flew up to help me track guitars, like everything. And then so it was just a complete no-brainer. He just did it out of the kindness of his heart, and like these are the types of people I love being around. And he did it out of the kindness of his heart. And so it was just a no-brainer when it was like bass player time. And it was like, obviously. And so it's just like a super serendipitous fit. And it was a really long-winded story, but like just to sort of show like the character of some of these people that we have in this project is just feels really, really great to me.
I mean, I really, as someone, like I said a little bit ago, like someone who went to therapy, one of the bigger underlying problems was addressing hypothetical what ifs that never come to fruition.
Sure.
And learning to be more in the moment. I mean, that's essentially what that whole story is. Like, you could have had your mindset on, well, this is what we did, and just, but there's also like the honesty of looking at it, going like, this isn't working. Don't force it. And everything that seemed to be working was things that we did naturally. We didn't overthink it. We didn't have a preconceived idea of like, it needs to be these things. Like you said, it just, the things that resonated with everyone the most were the things that were probably the most organic and natural that happened. And there's a sense to that. And you know, we can probably speak to this a little bit more from even a producing side. You know, there's something that I love about the songwriting process. Like, thankfully, I have so many amazing friends who are very talented. And hearing demos of songs, like, you know, there was a band that a friend of mine was in, and they had written this song. And he's like, dude, you got to hear this like thing we recorded. It was in the early days of like, what is it, Fruity Pebbles or whatever, or something like that.
Fruity
like,
Loops. Yeah.
Fruity Loops. That was it. Yeah. And so it was a thing where, you know, your home recordings got a little bit better than the one microphone in the center of the room kind of sounding recording. Totally. And I remember him being so excited. And the song just like, it was the first new song the band had after the first batch of songs when they first got together, which was written before they had gotten the vocalist, and was a thing where like those songs had been tired and road tested and all that from local gigs and playing it hundreds of times. And then I always get excited. And you see this when you see bands play that are at that level where they're still kind of a local band, or maybe they're regional touring, and they got that new song in the set. They're all very excited about, and the energy and intensity between even the demo and how they play it. But it's like, I always remember that, because when they finally recorded it for the next record, it just lost a little bit of that enthusiasm. You can literally hear that it's, all right, yep, it's this part, this is what I play. Mm-hmm. It had already kind of lost the sheen of the newness. And I've always said, I prefer the demo over the final product, because it lost that. And I feel like that's got to be a fine line you have to ride as a musician, as a producer, where you are allowing the mistakes and the humanity to come through in what you're playing, while also having it still be technically sound, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, that, I mean, speaking as someone who sort of made that my career, that's a very astute observation, and because that is exceptionally true. And it's, as a producer and as an artist, we're typically looking to maximize our emotional resonance, right? Or our emotional reciprocation with a listener. And so therefore, depending on the product, there are all kinds of different possible outcomes that can do that. So first of all, it's picking what style of outcome do we want that will do that. And there's something to be said. The reason there's two reasons people like the demo better, in my opinion, right? And reason number one is everything you just said, which is that there's an excitement to it. And it's like we talked about with how you are restructuring the way you do this podcast. It's like talking about how with Love Letter, we just sort of wrote off the cuff and we went less cerebrally, right? The problem is once you start dissecting something, you are like perfecting it, right? But you are also if you're not careful, you are sucking the cool out of it as well, right? And it's like, my favorite band, I probably say this on every fucking podcast, my favorite band is Fugazi, right? And so like there's something like those old Fugazi records, they're all old now, right? But like that I love is that they're real, they're honest, right? And I'll take, even as someone who like has spent 20 years making like the best sounding possible records I can, best sounding is not always best. You cannot sacrifice the energy, the performances, the unquantifiable things that do that thing where you get that human connection, the hair on the back of your arm standing up type of thing, or the lyrics that resonate with you that you can't help but remember. There's nothing like the production can never get in the way of that. Or shouldn't, I should say, get in the way of that. And if the production does get in the way of that, and unfortunately that is all too common, what you end up with is just over polishing something to the point where it's not exciting anymore, you know? And yeah, it is something you have to be really careful about. And so for this record, you know, a lot of my guitar takes, like I was saying earlier, like I'm not like a guitar wizard or anything like that. I think I'm a competent songwriter, but like if it felt good, dog, I leave it. Like I'm not going in there and micromanaging like guitar DIs and putting them like right on the grid or anything like that. I'm just fucking playing guitar, you know?
Right.
And that's it.
It's funny because as you were just kind of speaking to the minutia of like how to do something so it sounds good and it presents what you're doing to the best of its capabilities, while also getting out of your own way of not making it sterile.
Yep.
It's always been interesting because like I think it's because of the age and era of growing up, you know, where you still had tangible CDs, you looked at all the liner notes and everything, which you can't really do on a DSP anymore. But, you know, thinking back to like the Ross Robinsons and all the people that, you know, I'm sure everyone famously has seen that pull quote from Rick Rubin recently, where I forget who was interviewing him. He goes, "Can you play an instrument?" He goes, "No." He goes, "Do you know how to use any recording equipment?" He goes, "No."
Yeah.
And then he's like, they're like, "Well, what do you do?" And he's like, "I just basically kind of provide a vibe, and I trust my musical instincts of what's good." And a lot of people seem to put faith and stock into that.
That's a real thing.
Yes.
That's a real thing.
Yeah. But I was going to say the other thing that I've always admired, because, you know, listening to, you know, those late 90s, early 2000s John Feldman records, like the first used record store of the year and so on and so forth. There's something that even when I listen to it, I go, this shit is so overproduced, but it still somehow feels raw because he allowed for real moments to be juxtaposed in there. Like, I think it's Greener with the Scenery off the first used record, where you got all these strings building and building and building, and then he throws in the most raw audio of them throwing pots and pans at Bert over it.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's when I think of like that blend of like, you found the humanity, the thing that gives you goosebumps. Even talking about it gives me goosebumps because subsequently we had the DVD. You can see what's going into it. But he's able to then also put just this sheen on it that you're like, God damn, this is some really great pop production on an otherwise very raw, chaotic sound. And it's an interesting thing when you can kind of notice that in the music that you listen to and start picking apart, why do these things make me feel this way? And it's the attention to the details paid with the artist and from a producer standpoint and so forth.
Yep, exactly. A fine line between keeping it honest enough, or as honest as possible, such that it will be able to create an emotional resonance, but also sounds good enough that you want to fucking crank it, you know?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry.
Something in watching your YouTube channel the last less than 24 hours prepping for this, because in my quote unquote prepping, it's just trying to get a vibe of how someone talks. Famously, I've had some people on where I didn't do that, and then they are people who talk very quickly in like bursts. So like you'll ask a question and then you'll get all that. Yeah, so it was like this and and then you're like, oh shit, I wasn't expecting you to answer it like that. So at least if I can find things to get a sense of like rhythmic pattern of talking, so I like to do that. So it was a thing where I was watching one of your channels and you had kind of talked about the origin story of Defeater, and the interesting thing about it to me, that video, was you talking about how it took place at Comerica Park in Detroit, and I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So that Warped Tour and that spot is kind of, for a while, was where I went every year, and I saw a lot of bands and different friends and so forth. But it was interesting kind of watching that, because you're talking about how you had this idea, which I thought you were younger in it. So when you said earlier that you were like 28 or something like that, I was like, wow. Okay, go ahead. Was this a different band that was not Defeater then that was doing the Warped Tour thing?
This is going to be un-PC, but I don't really care. The band before Defeater was called Sluts.
Okay.
And so we were breaking into Warped Tour to sell and let me preface, the band was originally called Rocky Marciano, which was a boxer from Massachusetts. And someone in the band hated the name. And he said, we can change it to anything. And so we let my roommate name the band. And so my roommate, Max McCarthy, sup, at the time, another amazing person. We're like, you can name the band. So he goes up into his record collection. He's a huge American Nightmare, and at that point, Give Up the Ghost fan. And so he the line in was it in the world of sluts we keep the wet dream alive or whatever it is like I think from like that first track, the first real track on the Give Up the Ghost record. So he came down, and because we thought the band was a joke band anyway, we named it Sluts. And this was a different era, clearly, and that's the beauty of being in my 40s, right? But so we broke in originally with that. However, by the time it was Defeater, let me think. We were with Top Shelf Records and we could legitimately get into Warped Tour, but we did do the thing where we would like sell CDs all day and then go play a show in the afternoon, drive all night and just not sleep. That was a real thing.
So the thing about it, and more to the point versus, and thanks for clarifying. Cause when I watched it, I was like, wait, cause when you were saying that you were like 28 when Defeater kind of was like starting, and I was like, God damn, you were like doing that at 28. I was like, I don't know. I mean, there are other people who have connections that I'm like, I don't know if that's a very good idea, let alone when you're almost 30.
Yeah, not wrong.
But it was a thing where I was thinking about it because I think there's something to be said about, you know, some of the youthful exuberance of how you navigate life. I mean, today as when we're recording this, you know, I got furloughed from work for a week because we got so far ahead of making shirts and stuff like that we had to shut down for a week at least to build up more work. And I'm going to Chicago today, like pretty much as soon as I'm done with this, going to Chicago to hang out with like one of my longtime friends who's never spent time in Chicago outside of just like a quick day trip, and then you leave for a sport baseball game, which is what we're doing tomorrow. So tonight I'm taking him around Chicago and showing him the stuff. But it was a thing where I was like, I had to wrestle with, is it financially responsible for me to go for a day, spend the money, even in halves of, all right, we're getting a hotel, we're doing all this stuff, like the extra expenses associated with doing it, knowing that I don't have money coming technically.
Right.
But then I just, like, I called him because I happened to find his lucky coin that he had left at my house that he lost, quote unquote. And he's like, dude, just made my fucking week. Chicago's going to be rad tomorrow. And I was like, I got to do it. I got to, like, the excitement he had of doing this thing. I was like, I'd rather figure it out and be broke for a week or two than to not have the experience that'll last me a lifetime.
Well, yeah,
and I think there's a little bit of navigating that. And it was interesting because watching the video reminded me that there's some of us that just take these weird chances because I don't know if it's because we believe so much in our passion and our dreams or in ourselves and our friends that we're willing to take on these stupid things that could have very real life repercussions. But it also made me start thinking, especially now, because you're starting first with this new band. Do you think the landscape of the business has changed so much so that you or younger bands can't really do things like that to find their way into the industry?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. So 2 points again. To go back to your point about going to Chicago, I think that's great that you're going. And I also, the reason we would do something insane, like break into every Warped Tour for an entire summer, right, and sell our band and stuff. And the reason I became a producer in general, and the reason I did this stuff in general, is because, just speaking for me personally, I've always been far more afraid of taking the path. Like a lot of times, like in life, you're forced with like two paths. Like, we'll just like simplify this, right? But a path where you're like, it's a little bit more secure. I know where it goes. I know exactly where it goes. I don't like where it goes, but I know I get a little bit more security. And that's always like, that's the trap, right? I think most people do that. Then there's the other path, right? Where you're like, fuck, I don't know where that goes. I know it's what I want to do, but I don't know if it's going to work. I've just always gone that way. And the reason I've gone that way is because I am more afraid of locking myself into a path where I know for sure I don't do what I want to do. Right. I'm like, when you like sort of like rearrange those choices in your mind between like between like, do I do the thing I know I don't want to do and definitely know I get exactly something I don't want? Or do I maybe get what I want, could easily crash and burn, but like even if there's a 1% chance I do get what I want, I always went that way. So that's sort of how my brain works and why I've made the choices that I've made. And now I'm stumbling and trying to remember the second part of your question. Remind me again.
So the second part was just like, do you think the landscape of the music business, the industry has changed that like young bands can't take those kind of chances really anymore, or don't want to maybe?
Maybe they don't want to. I mean, streaming sort of democratized music for better and for worse, you know, but here's the thing. I played in punk and hardcore bands. They don't make money. So it wasn't like back in 2005 when you started a hardcore band, like you were just Scrooge McDuck, like swimming through your coins, you know. It wasn't like that at all. We did this because we were young punk kids who just had to go see the world. There's that Modern Life is War line, right? Like there's something happening somewhere, knowing we have to get there, right? And it felt very much like that. It was like, I don't know, man, I just gotta go. I just gotta go fucking see, because I just can't sit here anymore at this terrible job that I hate, you know, like. And so you've got that restless energy and you go, and never for a moment did I think I would make money with being in a band. And ironically, I remember the first time we made money. We did a small West Coast tour with Chae More. And we were like, up until this point, we paid to be in the band. I think most bands, you know, are in that position. And we got to the end of the tour. Our last show was in Riverside. And I remember standing with Andy. We were like, we paid our merch bill. We paid for our flights. We paid for like the gas. We paid for all the stuff. And there was enough money left over that like we could hand everybody, wasn't much, it was $250. And
better than nothing.
Like, yeah, dude. And Andy and I looked at each other. We were like, there's money left over, right? So we were like, what do we do? And we're like, I guess we just get money right now. And so, yeah, we gave everybody $250 and flew home. And I think at that point, that was a big moment where we were like, wait, that can happen. And it was helpful, right? It put a big like fire under us where we were like, oh, we should do that again, you know, and definitely kept us going. So regarding like bands now, in our world, I can only speak for our world, you know, which is just like punk, hardcore, this type of stuff. Like, I don't know. I never really made much money off of record sales or anything like that, right? So the money's by and large been on the road. If you really do well and you have enough streams where there's like some money coming in, and Defeater did do that truthfully like later on, but we never knew it was going to happen. And it's not, for us, it was not life-changing money, right? It was like
sustaining sort of
ish, yeah. You know what I mean? And like, so yeah, the money is just never, don't do it for the money. Kids, don't do it for the money. Do it if you want to do it, but don't do it for that reason.
Well, I think like we were saying earlier about sort of bad people get weeded out. I think those that are doing it for, I don't want to say improper reasons, but the wrong reasons will inevitably kind of be weeded out.
Misguided reasons, you know, just, yeah, like you'll find out really quickly that if money is like the thing that you're trying to derive, it would be hard for me to think of a worse way, you know, like.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I constantly joke with people, you know, in doing this, and so, you know, someone was like, you should get into, and I forget what the thing was. Someone's like, you should get into this. I was like, I already like am a bad to not even mediocre like musician. Like I have a handful of guitars. Do I need all the guitars I have? No, because I don't play in a band. I just, it's nice to have different tools that make different sounds and so forth. And you know, it's like, that's an expensive hobby. Doing this where it's like, oh, I just need, like, you know, I started with the microphone you were talking about earlier, like the, you know, the Yeti microphone, when those were the newer affordable ones. And then it was buying brand new laptops and brand new home computers and dual monitors and all of this other stuff. And I'm like, Jesus Christ, what a fucking money suck this was. Why did I get into something else that cost me so much more money to do and to upkeep. And I mean, even
Yeah.
like doing all like and it's something I talk about on the show quite a bit of, you start off, actually I said it earlier, you start off just for the enjoyment of playing with your friends and
Mhm.
the emotional outlet you get of doing this release. And then now you have to become a financier, you have to become a travel agent, you have to become like, you
Mhm.
have to unlearn all these other things that take away, and I guess kind of maybe even tamper down your passion for the thing, because you're like you were saying, well, now I have to do these things. I have
Mhm.
to pay taxes on this stuff. I have to figure out, I have to buy these cases, because if I
Oh
don't,
yeah.
then when we fly
Oh yeah.
internationally, that's going to suck. And, even now, like, I'm sure as a guitar player, I mean, you can't do this for drummers or anything, but it's probably got to be nice as a guitar player and bassist now that it's like, they have the quad cortexes and stuff. And for fly
Mhm.
dates, it's like you're
Right.
bringing pretty minimal things that you can bring onto the flight with you, which cut down on a lot of your overhead expenses and so forth. But
Yep. Totally.
there's that whole side of everything that, you know, I enjoy those conversations on and off the record, because to me, it's just infinitely fascinating as someone who played in a band, didn't enjoy doing that, because trying to get 4 or 5 other people, especially as most of my working life has been in retail and food, managing people. It's like, that's the last thing I want to do when I
Yeah.
want to grab an instrument. I don't want to manage you fuckers either.
Yeah. Exactly.
But then it becomes this thing of, pivoting. I call it pivot points, where I knew I wanted to do something in music. I just didn't know what that looked like. So at first it was, I wanted to do the band thing. I didn't enjoy that for a multitude of reasons. But then I got tired of hearing people go, well, there's no good bands. You can't see any good bands. So I started booking shows, which infinitely ruined going to see shows for me forevermore. Because now I can't look at not thinking about guarantees and overhead costs and what is the merch cut at this room and so on and so forth. And
Mhm.
that has ruined that for me forever. And then from there, writing about music, which that became a weird thing of, how do I articulate to someone that wasn't there, that makes them feel like they're there, but also does service to the people that were there, to be like, that's exactly how it felt. But I also got tired of being pigeonholed as, the rock metal guy, when it's like, I also did stuff covering Lil Wayne and Janet Jackson and stuff
Sure.
like that. It's like, I got to do other things that I'm interested in, to then pivoting and doing this, where it's like, I want to do this show. I don't want to be limited to a thing or a preconceived notion of who I am. But even all of those experiences brought me to what I do with this. But even this has been a challenging thing of like all different kinds of obstacles and things to get through. And I mean, I just hit the milestone the other day. Thankfully, a friend of mine's in a pretty big band and hates doing press, and only really does mine. So I'm the source for anything relating to this band.
Cool.
In the last like week or so, it got like 30,000 downloads on, or
Congrats.
views on YouTube, which hit the monetization thing. And I was like really excited about that. But then
Yep.
looking into the program, I'm like, holy fuck, there's so many other things I have to do to set this up. And now it becomes more of like a content creation job that I don't
Yeah.
want. So
Yeah.
it's like, even when I get these milestones that you think you want, you're like, it was so much easier when it just started with this idea, and it was pure and not diluted by everything else.
Dude, I couldn't agree more. And it's a funny problem to complain about, right? But
It's a first world problem,
yeah,
100%.
for sure, for sure. I had this experience. I've told the story before, but I had this experience. I was in Trier, Germany, with Full Force Fest, right?
Hmm.
And I think it was with Full Force Fest, and it was like, I can't remember. It was one of those ones, right? They kind of, to be honest, they kind of blend together. I'm in a field. It's hot in Germany, right? And there's many
Festival
tents
season.
everywhere I
Yeah.
look, right? And, but I was in like the catering line, right, with like Fletcher from Pennywise, Davey Havoc, like you name it, and we were all in the same catering line, and it's just so funny. I remember looking around because I always wondered as a kid, like going through like my fucking Minor Threat cassette tapes and like going through all my liner notes and all this stuff. I'm like, what is it like? What is it like? What is it like? And I was standing there like waiting to get my catering food. And I was like, oh fuck, like this is what it's like. I was like, wow. I was like, and that was a thing for me where I was having the itch of like, I knew I wanted to have a family. I knew I wanted to be a dad. That's always, not always, I shouldn't say that. In my 20s, early 20s, it wasn't that, but I started feeling it like mid 20s. I definitely was feeling it late 20s. And then by my early to mid 30s, it was really apparent to me. And I remember just sort of standing there, and I could delineate between like some of the people here, are here because they've built up their art and this stuff to a point where they get to be here, and that's really, really amazing. And I think I'm one of those people. And then there's lifers, and then there's people who are like, they don't want kids, they don't want domestic fucking anything, and they are stoked to be in the catering line. They're stoked to fucking play tonight, and they're going to drink their rider beer, and that's fucking sick, and they're going to ride till they die. And it's no disrespect to that at all. It's just different walks of life.
Yeah.
But I had this epiphany, in that catering line where I was like, oh, I'm kind of a homebody. I was like, this is so cool. This should be way cooler to me than it is. But like, I like can't help but think about like, I had these like weird nesting, like settling down things. Like I could feel bubbling up inside of me. And it was pretty profound, honestly.
I have had sort of that same thing, because I would say most of my life is, and especially being sort of adjacent to the industry, where it's like, excuse me, like last week we went to 3 shows because I had 3 friends on tour. 2 of them were literally on the same day, so it was all right, hopping back and forth between 2 different to show face to like everybody. But it was interesting because my wife and I are that way. We don't want kids. We're not having kids. So I feel like I kind of I owe it to, I don't want to say myself, but all of those that maybe want to have this life, whatever that looks like, a freedom of not being tied down to a child and adult responsibilities per se.
Yep.
But I have to go take advantage of these things. And it's kind of funny because a few weeks before, a friend of mine, they hit both an A and a B market. So they hit Detroit. A couple weeks later came to Grand Rapids. And I just sat at the merch table with my friend. Like the amount of times I've gone to just hang out at the merch table with my friend, who actually did merch for Pennywise a couple tours as well.
Cool. Yeah.
So it's funny that like those that don't really understand what it's like or get the feeling, I'll help him. I'll sit behind there. I'll help him grab shirts. I'll do stuff. And I enjoy all of it. Like it's kind of my getaway of sorts, because it's not what I get to do. But it's funny when you talk to people and they're like, how was the show last night? I'm like, I don't know. I sat in the lobby the whole time with my friend. And they're like, what? Like, yeah, I sat there and I slung some merch and I bullshitted for like 4 hours and helped load out. And then bus call was like an hour and a half later, and they left and I went home.
Yeah,
and they're like, you drove 2.5 hours each way to go do that. And I'm like, yeah, like that's fun to me.
Yeah,
and
that's awesome.
It's a thing where like when my wife comes with me, she enjoys some aspect. I think she enjoys more of the hookups aspect of like, well, I have a sticky and I can go here and I can watch the show from these vantage points as shorter, smaller people and not have people touching us. And
sure.
Like that's nice. And that was the thing for me last weekend, getting to see 2 of her favorite bands through me doing this, making the connections I've had. Like to see her happy at a show was really nice for me to step back and just see that. But I've joked with a handful of people, and I might pull the trigger next year. Like a friend of mine, I was like, hey, may not be super feasible, but typically like your tours are like 2.5 weeks roughly, because you're in a bigger band. So like that's the priority. Could I come out for like a week and do merch?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah. And he goes, you would actually kill it, because like you work at a screen printing place. So like you would understand the garments, the prints, all that stuff, and be able to articulate that to people better. And you're working customer service, so you're good with people. And us in like this world, so you're not going to be like a Punisher and weird. So like, exactly. Like if you want to do it, like, fuck yeah, let's figure that out. And I know my wife will be kind of upset because she looks at it as more of like, well, you're traveling and you're partying and all this stuff. And it's like, no, I'm sitting in an area for 8 to 10 hours doing fuck all and nothing other than, hey, can I get that one? Is there anything in that in a different color? No, it's literally what it says right there. Does it say I have an XO? I don't. Asking the same fucking questions over and over again, but it's fine. But like to me, like I enjoy that, and I at least want to get. I mean, I've done this shitty like tour I booked, around the Midwest, and eating shit and basically playing to nobody. And so to do it on a little bit of a higher level, it's like, let me do that and just like experience that once. It may not be my career, it may not be anything else, but like to do it once, I think would satiate the itch of like, I want to do this. I think I want to do it.
I mean, dude, especially go out for a week if you have the opportunity to, and if you can do it on a higher level, it's cool. We did this weird for Defeater, but we did a tour in the end of 2013 with August Burns Red, and I love those guys to death, honestly. And I don't even like really like metal music. So it's not really about that, but it's just like I love them. And they have a bus, you know? And I was like, oh fuck, like what is that? Like, you know? And so like we were in a van, you know, but like they were in a bus. And so many nights, you know, they'd be like, Jay, like, and it would free up room in the van if one of us, they had an extra,
went with him. Yeah,
and
jump
one
on.
of, and they were like, yeah, like, you know, we'll take one of you guys like on different nights, you know, we kind of rotate out. And so I got to do that. And dude, it was like, I was like, oh, maybe I could do this more than I thought I could. Cause I was just like, you just like wake up in Denver. And I'm like, I had a full night's sleep. And like, you're like Googling coffee places and you're like, oh, I like this.
It's interesting. I've had someone like, you know, because sometimes I'll get to do these on, you know, buses and so forth. And it's always interesting because people are like, isn't it so cool? What's it like being on the bus? And I'm like, you ever been in a studio apartment? They're like, yeah. And I go, with 15 other people and shit everywhere. And they're like, no. And I go, that's what it's like. It feels like you're constantly invading someone's space. And I go, me personally, like, I'm sure it's different when that's like your environment and you get to like, you have your spaces. But to me as an outsider that's there for a little bit, I always feel like I'm impeding on someone's, you know, that's their retreat. That's where they go to get away from everything. And now here I am, or with somebody else in the band, like partying and shit. And you're like, I'm sorry, dude. Like you can't get away from this.
Yeah, no, I always try to be as respectful as possible too with that. Cause it's like they pay for the bus and you know, whatever it is, but it is, I'll be honest. I'm believe it or not, like I'm kind of a secret jock. So like I love football.
Oh, I love sports.
Dude. And so we were touring in the fall and like they're huge Eagles fans. And so like it was real. I wasn't an Eagles fan, but now I like sort of am just from that experience, just because like how passionate they were. And I'll be honest, like I love punk, I love music, I love all that stuff. But bro, just like getting on the bus and then like turning on football, it was like, even if it was just like a 3-hour thing and just like, oh, this is like insane. I just like get to watch football with my friends. Like this is, in the venue's like right there. And you're like, oh, pretty good. I like this.
Yeah. Something kind of and winding because I don't want to take up too much of your day. Thank you again for all your time as well. Especially like I said, that this happened in less than 24 hours time. So I'm not one typically to like kind of I would say blow smoke or whatever, but I wanted to share this story because I think it's not one I've ever told on here, but I think it's a really interesting way of just like how we find things when, and you know, as I was saying earlier, like things finding you when they're supposed to, or letting things happen naturally. So I went to go visit like one of my really good friends that lives out in Oregon, or lived in Oregon at the time. And so we went to Portland, and a thing I like to do is get little keepsake tattoos like when I go somewhere. So like I got it's a pine tree that has Mount Hood in it. So that's my Oregon tattoo. And when I was getting it done, you know, as they often do at shops, they just have like a random playlist going. So I'm getting tattooed, and you know, it's a different environment, not one I've ever been in. So it takes a little bit of kind of getting into that rhythm of like, okay, this is how this person's tattooing, heavy-handed or not, or whatever, and just figuring everything out. So I was trying to focus on looking around at the shit around the shop and just kind of detaching, sort of. And I happened to notice this song playing, and I'm like, this it almost sounds Misery Signals-esque, but it's not as aggressive. And like, I just kind of was like really drawn to it. And then I had the wherewithal in the moment to be like, because I didn't have my phone on me, but I was like, I should have someone go look to see who this is. Because I want to hear more of this. And I may never, if I don't say something, however awkward it may be in the moment to do that, especially getting tattooed.
Yeah.
It happened to be a Defeater song. And that's how I was introduced to the band. And I then went to a record shop, one of my favorites, Sonic Boom, out in Seattle. Picked up I'm fucking awful with names, people's names and other things, but it was the one with the stained glass, that album. And then picked up a few other records that were there as well, back catalog, and then went home and just played the shit out of all that and basically fell in love with the band. And it's like, I may have come late to the party of Defeater at the time, although I don't think I was really that far behind. I think you only had like 2 records or so at the time.
Yeah, there's 2 LPs before that. Yeah.
So at that point, but it was just interesting to think about how I found this new band that like really resonated with me, all because I was kind of trying to find a moment of centering myself and then kind of paying attention to what's going on around me, and then having the wherewithal to go, I really enjoy this. I should make it awkward and step outside of myself for a second and go, can someone please tell me who this is before the opportunity and the music is lost forever. And I think that, like, I think about that all the time of like how we take in music now, and how, like, if you're not paying attention, something that can mean something to you in a moment moving forward, however far down the road, can be lost, like, just because we're too afraid to say something.
Yeah, well, dude, I mean, I'm glad you did, first of all, because that's the whole reason I would do this, like, whole make records and put them out thing, is for moments like that. Like, what you actually just described is a phenomena that I usually quantify in terms of getting into your buddy's car and like they're playing something and you don't know what it is and you're going somewhere to do something, right? And like something's on there. This is like maybe a little bit more my generation, but like you don't know what CD is in their CD player and they don't have a cool enough CD player to tell you, right? Yeah. And you do the, what's this? And like, I would be that person, like the driver who knew exactly what it was. And when my friends would come in the car, right? And most of the time they wouldn't acknowledge whatever was playing. It was just like, okay, we're going wherever we're going. But when it was, what's that? And they actually ask, that's like a moment I don't personally get to see as like a creator happen out in the world, but to hear stories like that is so amazing for me, because that's effectively a tattoo shop version of a, wait, what's that, moment. And that means that the emotional energy that I put into creating that did like what I had hoped and intended it would do, which is means everything to me. That's like the whole reason you do it, so I thank you for sharing that.
No, it was one of those, like, I was debating whether I even tell you that story, because it's like, it doesn't really add value or anything at all. It's just like a weird self-centered story. But then we're listening to you talk about, I do these things because it's a thing that I need to get out, and everything we've kind of discussed, or you've discussed in this chat, it's like, I think you'll kind of dig that. And I'm trying to be a lot better of telling people in real time how I feel or what they mean, because I think we, again, like I was sort of saying, I think we're too inside of ourselves and feel like if you say something to someone, I just made it weird, or what does that person do with it? And so it becomes this thing where I think too often, too many of us are in our own heads about that. And it's like, sometimes make it awkward. Say the nice thing to someone in real time versus being like, I wish I would have.
I love that, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you did.
Again, that's being, almost 40 now and being like, these are the things that you're supposed to do, I guess, when you get older, is self-reflection and all that kind of stuff.
Sure is. Mm-hmm. Well,
so
awesome.
With the record coming out a month from now-ish, give or take a couple of days, what are you most excited for everyone to hear?
Fuck, like what song, or
just in general, like, because like it's the thing where it's been yours for however long you've had this at this point. I think one of your videos, you were talking about songwriting, and you're like, well, I actually came up with this thing, and it's going to be for this record you'll hear in like 10 months.
Yeah.
But it's like, again, kind of going to that demo thing, like I could see and even, I guess, subsequently feel your energy and excitement about this thing. Yeah. So it's like, it's been yours and the guys and those that have had it in whatever capacity. But in a month, it's no longer yours, it's everybody's. So like, how do you feel knowing that that's approaching?
Like when you're a kid and you're counting down the days to Christmas, and I have a 7-year-old who does exactly that, and it is crazy. It's just, we talked about things feeling new again, and it feels new again. It feels exciting again. It feels, like I said, I thought I would never do this. And so it feels amazing and surreal that it's happening. And it feels amazing that it's happening with all my best friends that just so happen to be my favorite musicians in the world. And it's really tied in. My wife actually recently got a job as the label manager for Iodine, which is funny because we were putting this out on Iodine way before that happened. And she did all the interviews and all the stuff. And so now she's really intimately involved. And so it feels really personal. And this isn't just hype. Like, I think it's the best piece of art I've ever made, or been a part of, from a songwriting standpoint. I talked about earlier about like needing time to recharge, needing time to like fill up those like creative sort of like coffers again. And I had a lot of time to do that this time. And so I had a lot to pull from and a lot to draw from. And I think one of my favorite things from our close friends and family and those who have heard the whole record, and I've gotten great feedback from them, which is nice. But what they've said is that like, I thought this was just going to sound like Defeater. And I can tell a little bit because I know you, but it's its own thing, you know, completely its own thing. And that makes me feel really good. Now, mind you, I write with minor chords and my song structures and all that stuff. Like there's going to be, if you liked the stuff that I wrote for Defeater, there's a really strong chance that you'll like this too. But like this fucking 10 years ago, you know, and like I've made hundreds of records then. I learned from every band that I produce. I you know, like, so I learned, pick up so much stuff and just, yeah, it's a more diverse set of skills. And yeah, I guess the way I feel is how my 7-year-old feels when he's about a month out from Christmas, I think would be a good way to put that.
You said something that I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it, because I think, again, it's an interesting talking point. As someone who has indirectly worked with my significant other,
Yep.
Granted, I worked in entirely different capacities within the company than my wife, than what she does. But I tend to find the hard part I had, or I should say we had, was you come home inevitably like you do and sort of complain about your day to each other.
Sure.
And the problem I ran into was part of what I was complaining about had a part of what she does. So it'd be a thing like when I was going through training, it's like, why are they having you do this? This has nothing to do, you know, there's all these different things that have to be in place before you would even need to quote unquote test this thing. Having you do that is irrelevant. Like it's just a waste of your time. So then she would kind of jot a note down to make a point to talk to people in the powers that be to ratify that and rectify that, I should say.
Sure.
And so at a certain point, I just kind of realized I was like, I don't think it's healthy for us to work for the same company and doing the same things, because now we can't escape this thing. There's no boundary. There's no off button. It's like, we just live in it 24/7. And even during my exit interview, I was like, you know, I will choose my wife and our relationship over any job any day. It may be still too early. You may not really have anything to do, you know, with your wife's side of what she does at the record label, but how has it been to have her be associated and kind of working in an industry and possibly more hands-on with you, especially with this release? How has it been to navigate that now that it's something maybe new?
So far, so great.
Okay.
I would say the pressure's off, right? Without getting too weird or whatever, like the pre-sale went well. So like the financial pressure of like the success of this release, from like me feeling about how, you know, like the label is spending all this money on this art I created, and like it's a small, like the label's growing for sure, right? And it's a real label, and that's great. But like at the same time, like, you know, like I don't want to be a liability for them. And so my wife's a part of that. So I felt like, oh my God, like I hope this goes okay, because like I don't want to be something I want to be an asset to the whole thing, right? I want my contributions to be an asset, and fortunately, so far that's been the case, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So that makes things easier for sure. But Jessie, my wife Jessie, is I was just talking about with some of the band members, like in the last couple of days, like a complete fixture in Love Letter. If there's a lot of things that would not get done if she didn't have the relationship with all of us that she has and also has with the label. And so we're in a perfect storm situation. So everything has felt really great. However, to resonate with your point about the conflicts that can arise, before Jessie worked for Iodine, she ran a vintage clothing company. And early on in that company, I was also helping. That went less well. And I did what you did, which was to say, I'm here if you need me on that one, but this is your thing, and I respect that. So as opposed to like being partners in this or whatever that looks like.
Like I was like playing with picks, by the way.
Yeah, dude, I do this I cannot not do this.
I have things I fidget with that don't make noise.
I have to fidget, and that's usually a pick.
Yeah.
really funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said, so I just kind of like bowed out, not like don't talk to me about this, but more just like, again, like what you said, right? Like the relationship is, it's one of, if not the most important thing. My relationship with my wife and my child and my mom, my family is the most important thing in my entire life, and my friends. Like relationships are it for me. So anything that would sort of come between that stuff is like, that's what's got to be figured out, not the relationship.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for the time. What would you like to plug online or anything in general?
Oh, sweet. I get to plug stuff.
Yeah,
Nice.
you get to
Yeah,
do this whole thing where you got to remember all your socials and everything where you exist, non in real life.
okay, so let me plug stuff. If you are an aspiring audio engineer, hit me up. I've sort of fallen in love with mentoring other engineers, and I keep a small and manageable roster of audio engineers, songwriters, and producers, and I interact with them every day. And we've taken a lot of guys full time, and it's been amazing for me to help people take that leap away from maybe we talked about the path that you don't that you're on is secure but you don't love, and I've been able to guide people towards things that they've only ever dreamt about, and that's been very, very fulfilling for me. So you can hit me up. You can put my email in there. It's jay@jmaas.com, or hit me up on Instagram, J_Maas, whatever. You can reach out in any way you want. That's fine. I am the CEO and founder of a company called Master, which is a pun, but master.io. And it's a cloud-based online mastering AI platform. I come from a computer science background. And so myself and one of the lead developers from Reddit developed this product. And if you are, like most people, a songwriter, or you make your music on Logic, or even all the way up to like you have your own studio, if you want a really, really great AI to master your stuff in just a couple minutes, I recommend going to that. That's master.io. Super affordable, and the iterative and creative process of using it is great. We also fix all like the mix note hell, all the collaboration, all the different formats you're going to need. We handle all that stuff for you. And so those are kind of my main companies. And then lastly, I have my third man of many hats. I co-founded a company called Fast Track, and that website is fasttrackacademy.co. And that is if you want a more passive educational experience about audio production, you can go there. It's only $20 a month, and there's a wealth of information there. And we're constantly bringing on new engineers who are going to offer their philosophies about recording as well. And it's a wonderful place to go to educate yourself. And so those are the things I have to plug.
Awesome. I very thankful of your time today. This was something, like I said, I've been after you for a little bit. I definitely, like I have said several times in this chat and in general, I believe these things happen when they're supposed to, because I don't know that the conversation would have been as maybe good and informative for others as this one I feel like was. Great. So very appreciative of your time, and hopefully Love Letter does some touring, even if it's in a smaller capacity, and makes its way out to Michigan, or at least nearby, so I can go.
I can see it happening.
Fair enough. That'll be cool. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the record instead of the one song. I didn't know if asking for a media link was too soon, considering the first single dropped yesterday.
Oh, just email Jessie. She'll get it for you, I'm sure.
Fair enough.
Yeah, cool. Awesome.
Well, thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, and chat soon.
Okay, later, man.
Bye. So that was my conversation with Jay. I want to thank him once again for taking the time so quickly as well. It's always funny when doing some of these. I think a lot of you would be astonished to see how long the back and forth process between the initial email blast that goes out about something, or me requesting someone to come on, versus them actually coming on and doing the thing. I think a total of maybe 4 or 5 emails were sent in a matter of like 20 minutes, and this thing was scheduled and ready to go the very next day. And that kind of stuff doesn't always happen, but it's always appreciative when it does. And honestly, I mean, you just heard the chat. I thoroughly enjoyed my time talking with Jay, and I always love those people who are willing to kind of, I don't want to, it sounds so stupid to me to say like that, are willing to be so open and kind of take the risk of opening up to a stranger, but it's essentially what this is. And it's not I don't know. I keep kind of getting flummoxed a little bit because I'll have people reach out and friends and other people who have been on the show and so forth and, tell me, oh, this episode with so-and-so was really good. It's crazy that you got them to, talk about this. More recently, I was at a show and Jordan from Story Main's Kill the Lights, the Dice Today show, that's what it was. And his wife was out and her and I got to talking, obviously about our dogs, brother and sister dogs that we both have and needing to get them together, which eventually we need to do. But all that said, she, kind of stopped for a minute, was just like, I was really impressed with the things that you got Jordan to talk about because he doesn't talk about those things with anybody. And I felt kind of bad because at the end of the thing, she said that he stayed up for like 2 or 3 hours just sitting there. You're like, I can't believe I told him this thing. I can't believe I said this on a thing. And it's one of those things that when you hear that, you just, I don't know, it's so hard to take that in and take the compliment. But it's a thing where, to me, I feel like I want to put it right back on the guest because they have to be willing to meet me and answer my questions. They don't have to, but if they do, I think that's what really makes this medium so special. And I think in our conversation, Jay and I traversing, talking about producing, talking about songwriting, talking about all the things that we did in our time together, I didn't know if Jay would do any of that. I don't really know much about him. I know that he has all of these videos on his website and doing Instagram reel shorts and stuff like that about producing and how to make the best of your recording for drum tones and all these different tricks and tips that he's learned over the years of recording different people and himself. And so, I mean, on that scale, I know what he does, what he presents, but to kind of really get into it and some of the things we talked about, I don't know. I don't take that lightly, and I feel like it should go back to the guest before it goes to me. I know a lot of people obviously do not share that sentiment, which makes it kind of awkward for me at times because, as I've said many times, I don't really do well with compliments because I think there are other people in the process of receiving said compliment where you should give, credit where it's due back to other people. So all of that said, I thoroughly enjoyed talking with Jay. I am very much looking forward to hearing the new Love Letter album. Literally, I think a couple of days after we did this chat, they were back in the studio recording, which should be their new full length, I believe. And very much looking forward to it. I mean, I can still listen to Defeater if I want to. I can still listen to those songs and still kind of get sort of that sound that Jay has that he writes in. But I think this new band, I think there's going to be something, and I don't mean this to sound in a negative way or a backhanded compliment, but I think this is going to kind of take what Defeater was, and even though I found it kind of later, I still feel like it's sort of like the best way it makes me feel is it makes me feel reflective of when I was in my mid 20s, maybe early 30s, where you're kind of trying to figure things out in life and figure out your place, figure out your different relationships, and a lot of the other things that happen in one's life. And when I listen to those records, there's a lot of, like, I would say, for lack of a better term, not teen angst, but just youthful angst. And so when I listen to it, that's what I get. And the first song that I got to hear of Love Letter, I feel like Love Letter is going to basically be sort of a continuation of where Defeater was, but I think it's going to be more introspective is what I keep coming back to when I listen to the single. It still feels aggressive, but it feels like it's pointed in a certain, like you know where to harness that energy and that anger, and you know where to put it now. And I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else. Sometimes when I listen to music, I think about things like that. Like, oh, this makes me feel this way. I identify with it in this way. And it's a beautiful thing about music is, even, like I said, even though I wasn't into Defeater when they first came out, oh, fuck, we are approaching 20 years in 4 more years. So in 15 plus years of the band being around, we are still going back to those albums. And that's the beautiful thing about music, though, is that you can find a band when it's supposed to find you. And I think about that too. I was kind of talking in the intro about the what ifs of the world where you don't say the thing or you don't do the thing. And I constantly think to myself with this podcast right now, like, what if I hadn't listened to Defeater and asked somebody who it was when I was getting tattooed, and thinking about it now, about how I wouldn't have had this really awesome conversation with somebody years later. So butterfly effect, whatever you would like to call that. But sometimes it's interesting to think about how something so minute in the moment leads to something bigger down the road. So keep that in mind. I know the demographic of the show is somewhat around my age, somewhat about 10, 15 years younger than me based on the bands I have on. So I'd like to try to impart some wisdom when I can, some things I've been thinking about. It was actually something I had asked Michael Stani of Dark Tranquility when I talked to him the other day, because he just recently celebrated his 50th birthday. And obviously, as I've been saying for the last little bit, my birthday, my 40th, is coming up pretty quick. We are about 3 months away as of when I'm recording this. And time really does go by a lot faster. I was just reminded of this the other day talking about someone's kid, a friend of mine's kid, and I was like, fuck, your kid's like a teenager. God damn, shit makes me feel old. So all of that to say, let's start wrapping up this episode. If you would like to keep up with Jay, it's simple enough. You can find him at jmaas.com. That'll be where all of his recording stuff is, all the links to his socials. If you'd like to go record with him, all of the links to do such are on his website. Otherwise, if you would like me to do it for you, it's facebook.com at jmaasrecording, Instagram at j_moss, as well as Twitter at j_moss. Keep up with Love Letter and what's going on with them. You can find them at facebook.com/loveletterband, Instagram and Twitter at loveletterhc. And if you'd like to keep up with the podcast, you can find us simple enough, Brew Speak Pod, on all your major social media platforms. I want to thank all the new followers, all the new subscribers on YouTube. I am about 30-ish subscribers away from the 1K. That will allow me to monetize the channel, which would be greatly appreciated. If you are not doing such already, please just click that little subscribe button, whatever, or smash it, as the YouTuber people say. I am just but a one-man operation over here, and all the support and feedback is greatly appreciated. And if you would like to send me some feedback beyond just the socials, you can email me at brutallyspeaking@gmail.com. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that's important. Do it for the same reasons everyone else asks you to, if you feel so inclined. And support our podcast sponsor, Rockabilia. Head on over to rockabilia.com. Keep up with all the latest going-ons and collaborations that they have going on. Frankie is he still out in Italy? Well, either way, he was out in Italy. He got to do the really cool thing and go hang with the Avenged Sevenfold guys. It's funny to text with him and realize how long he's known all those guys and a lot of the things that they have been doing, including, like you heard me, I think, say a couple of weeks ago, the tour poster for the show that they did overseas, the European show with some artist that I can't remember the name of, but they're constantly doing different things, and love seeing how Frankie and all the people over at Rockabilia's minds work with some of these collaborations. There's some that I have been privy to that have not happened. I don't know if they ever will, but there is some really, really interesting things that Frankie and the people over at Rockabilia have tried doing over the years. So go support them for supporting this show. We got some other stuff we're trying to work on here in the nearish future. More on that when we can talk about that. But huge shout out to Rockabilia. Use our code Brutally at checkout. Take 10% off your total purchase order. And for the Brutally Speaking podcast, I am John, and I will see you all next week, where I have a very quick lunch break chat with Mercedes of Kitty. That was a really fun one. Looking forward to getting that one out to you. Enjoy the rest of your week.